There is a moment in nearly every meaningful transformation that feels strangely empty. Nothing dramatic happens. No doors suddenly swing open. No unmistakable sign appears in the sky. In fact, if you judged your life only by what your eyes could see, you might conclude that nothing is changing at all. Yet beneath that still surface, something remarkable has already begun. Most people have been taught to measure progress by visible movement. We believe that if life is improving, we should immediately see better circumstances, more opportunities, clearer answers, or constant excitement. But the deepest changes in human life almost never begin this way. They begin in silence. Think about nature for a moment. A seed buried beneath the earth does not announce that it has started growing. The ground looks exactly the same as it did the day before. To anyone standing above it, nothing appears different. Yet underneath the surface, the entire future of that tree is already unfolding. Invisible roots begin reaching into the darkness, long before a single leaf meets the sunlight. The human mind follows a surprisingly similar pattern. Before your outer life changes, your inner world begins reorganizing itself. Old beliefs quietly loosen their grip. Long-held assumptions begin to dissolve. Desires that once consumed your attention slowly lose their power. None of this makes headlines in your daily life. It happens quietly, often without your conscious awareness. This is why periods of silence can feel so confusing. Part of you wonders whether you've lost your direction. Another part fears you've somehow fallen behind. You compare your life with people who appear to be moving quickly, while you feel as though you've been standing in the same place for months. The temptation is to assume that silence means failure, but silence and failure are not the same thing. Sometimes silence is simply the mind withdrawing from everything that no longer belongs to the person you are becoming. There comes a point in psychological growth when constant external stimulation no longer satisfies you. Endless distractions begin to lose their appeal. Conversations that once entertained you now leave you strangely empty. You may even notice yourself spending more time alone, not because you've become isolated, but because something within you is asking for space. Many people become frightened at this stage because they mistake stillness for loneliness. Yet there is a profound difference between being alone and becoming whole. When life becomes quieter, you begin hearing parts of yourself that were previously drowned out by noise. The fears you've avoided begin speaking. The dreams you've ignored quietly return. Questions you postponed for years suddenly demand honest answers. At first, this can feel uncomfortable. Most of us spend enormous amounts of energy keeping ourselves busy, precisely because stillness forces us to meet ourselves. It removes every convenient distraction and asks a difficult question. Who are you when there is nothing left to impress, chase, or escape? That question cannot be answered overnight. It unfolds slowly, one quiet evening at a time, one thoughtful walk, one honest conversation with yourself, one unexpected realization that changes how you see your past. Without realizing it, your inner world begins arranging itself differently. You stop reacting automatically. You begin observing your thoughts instead of believing every one of them. You notice emotional patterns you've repeated for years. You become curious instead of defensive. This shift may seem insignificant from the outside, but inwardly, it changes everything. Because every lasting transformation begins with awareness. You cannot build a healthier future while remaining unconscious of the habits shaping your present. Silence creates that awareness. It gives your mind permission to examine what constant activity never allowed you to notice. Perhaps you've recently experienced days where everything feels unusually calm. Maybe life isn't exciting, but it isn't chaotic either. At first, this calmness may seem unsettling because you're accustomed to measuring life by emotional intensity. But growth rarely announces itself through emotional fireworks. Very often, it appears as an unfamiliar sense of peace, not because every problem has disappeared, but because your relationship with those problems has started changing. You may find yourself worrying a little less, seeking approval a little less, rushing toward answers a little less. These are not signs that you've become indifferent. They are signs that your inner foundation is becoming stronger. People often imagine transformation as becoming someone entirely different. In reality, it is usually the gradual removal of everything that was never truly you. The unnecessary fears, the borrowed expectations, the identities built to please others, the endless pressure to prove your worth. As these layers quietly fall away, life may temporarily appear emptier than before. But emptiness is not always loss. Sometimes it is simply space. Space where clarity can emerge. Space where authentic purpose can take root. Space where your deeper nature can finally breathe. This is why you should not fear seasons when nothing seems to be happening. The absence of visible progress does not mean the absence of real progress. Some of the most important chapters of your life are written before anyone, including you, can see the first sentence. The quiet you are experiencing today may be preparing you for a future your current perspective cannot yet imagine. And when the moment finally arrives, you will realize that the silence was never empty. It was preparing you all along. If you remain patient through that quiet season, something subtle begins to happen. It is not that the world around you changes overnight. Instead, you begin noticing that you are no longer responding to life in the same way. Situations that once consumed your thoughts now barely hold your attention. Arguments that would have kept you awake for days no longer seem worth your energy. The things that once felt essential begin to lose their emotional weight. At first, this change can be confusing. You may wonder if you've become less passionate, less ambitious, or somehow disconnected from the life you used to know. But what is actually taking place is something far more meaningful. Your inner world is quietly rewriting its priorities. Without making a conscious decision, you are beginning to outgrow an older version of yourself. Many people expect growth to feel like gaining something new. They imagine becoming stronger means acquiring more confidence, more knowledge, or more certainty. Yet one of the clearest signs of genuine transformation is not what you gain. It is what you no longer need. You no longer need every conversation to end with you being understood. You no longer need every disagreement to be won. You no longer need every person to approve of your choices. These changes often happen so gradually that you hardly notice them. One day you simply realize that something which once controlled your emotions has quietly lost its power. That realization is more significant than it first appears. The personality is shaped by countless habits, emotional responses, and learned patterns. Many of them were created long ago, often as ways of protecting yourself. Perhaps you learned to seek constant validation because you feared rejection. Perhaps you became overly responsible because uncertainty once felt dangerous. Perhaps you developed the habit of pleasing everyone because conflict seemed unbearable. These patterns served a purpose. They helped you survive certain seasons of life. But survival and growth are not the same thing. What protects you during one chapter can imprison you during the next. As you mature inwardly, these old strategies begin to feel strangely uncomfortable. You may catch yourself reacting in familiar ways, only to realize that the reaction no longer feels authentic. It's almost as though your mind pauses before repeating an old pattern and quietly asks, "Is this still who you are?" That pause is powerful. It creates a space where choice becomes possible. Instead of speaking from anger, you choose understanding. Instead of chasing attention, you choose peace. Instead of fearing change, you begin welcoming the unknown. These choices may seem small, but they are evidence that your identity is evolving. Growth is rarely dramatic. It is often almost invisible. It appears in moments when nobody is watching. It happens when you decide not to send the angry message, when you forgive without needing recognition, when you walk away from an unhealthy situation without demanding the last word. No audience applauds these moments, yet they reshape your character more than any public achievement ever could. There is another sign that often surprises people during this stage. You begin losing interest in things that once seemed incredibly important. Perhaps you no longer feel drawn to constant comparison. The endless race to prove yourself begins feeling exhausting rather than motivating. Success is no longer measured by how impressive your life appears to others, but by how honest it feels to you. This shift can be unsettling because the world often rewards appearances. It encourages people to collect achievements, recognition, and status, while ignoring the condition of their inner lives. But eventually something changes. You realize that external success cannot compensate for internal emptiness. No amount of praise can silence a restless mind. No accomplishment can replace genuine self-respect. So your attention slowly moves inward. You become more interested in understanding yourself than performing for others. You ask deeper questions. What actually matters to me? Which desires truly belong to me? Which dreams have I borrowed from someone else's expectations? These questions are uncomfortable because they challenge identities you've carried for years. Sometimes the answers require letting go of ambitions that no longer reflect your heart. Sometimes they require releasing relationships that only existed to maintain an old version of yourself. Sometimes they require admitting that you've been chasing goals simply because you thought they would finally make you feel enough. But here is the remarkable truth. The moment you stop living according to outdated expectations, you begin creating space for a life that reflects your authentic nature. This is why transformation often feels like loss before it feels like freedom. You lose familiar habits. You lose familiar fears. You lose familiar definitions of success. And for a while, you may wonder who you are becoming. The answer cannot be rushed. Identity is not rebuilt in a single decision. It is shaped through countless quiet moments of honesty. Every time you refuse to return to an old emotional pattern, you strengthen a new one. Every time you choose integrity over approval, patience over impulse, or truth over comfort, you reinforce the person you are becoming. Eventually, these choices become natural. What once required great effort becomes effortless. Peace replaces constant struggle. Clarity replaces confusion. Authenticity replaces performance. Looking back, you'll realize that the greatest evidence of change was never found in your circumstances. It was found in the simple fact that the person who once reacted to life with fear no longer exists. And that is when you know that good things are no longer just approaching, they are already beginning within you. Once your inner life begins to settle and your old reactions start losing their grip, another quiet shift often takes place. It is so subtle that many people dismiss it at first. They call it coincidence, luck, or simply good timing. Yet when these moments begin appearing again and again, they invite you to pay closer attention. Not because they predict the future, but because they reveal that your awareness is changing. The world itself has not suddenly become more meaningful. Rather, you have become more capable of noticing meaning. Think about how often you have overlooked something simply because your mind was occupied elsewhere. You walk past the same street every day without noticing the small tree growing between the cracks in the sidewalk. Then one morning, for no obvious reason, you see it. The tree was always there. Your attention simply wasn't. The same is true of life. When the mind is consumed by fear, urgency, and constant distraction, it filters out almost everything except what seems immediately necessary for survival. It becomes difficult to recognize opportunities, encouraging conversations, or subtle moments of insight, because your attention is narrowed by anxiety. But as your inner world grows quieter, your perception expands. You begin noticing conversations that arrive exactly when you need them. You read a sentence that answers a question you've been carrying for weeks. Someone unexpectedly shares a story that reflects your own hidden struggle. A forgotten memory returns at precisely the moment it helps you understand your present. None of these experiences force themselves upon you. They simply become visible because your mind is no longer drowning in noise. Many people spend years waiting for extraordinary signs while overlooking the extraordinary wisdom hidden inside ordinary moments. Growth teaches you to value the quiet message over the dramatic announcement. Perhaps you've experienced a time when the same idea seemed to appear everywhere. Different people mentioned it without knowing each other. Books opened to the exact chapter you needed. A conversation you almost skipped contained the very perspective you had been searching for. Whether you describe these moments as meaningful coincidences or simply heightened awareness matters less than what they awaken within you. They interrupt the feeling that life is random. They remind you that your attention shapes your experience more than you realize. As you become more honest with yourself, your mind naturally begins connecting patterns that previously remained scattered. Events that once seemed unrelated suddenly reveal a deeper relationship. Past disappointments begin making sense. Old failures appear less like punishments and more like preparation. This shift changes everything. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you begin asking, "What was this trying to teach me?" That single change in perspective transforms pain into insight. It allows your past to become a source of wisdom rather than a prison of regret. There is something else that often emerges during this stage. Dreams become more memorable, not necessarily because they contain mystical predictions, but because your unconscious mind has finally found enough quiet to communicate more clearly. Throughout the day, your attention is often scattered across responsibilities, obligations, and endless distractions. During sleep, however, the deeper layers of your mind continue their work. Sometimes they speak through symbols, sometimes through forgotten places, sometimes through people you haven't thought about in years. These dreams are not instructions to follow blindly. They are invitations to become curious. They ask you to explore emotions, fears, hopes, and possibilities that your waking mind may have ignored. The more willing you become to reflect instead of react, the richer these inner conversations become. You also begin noticing recurring themes in your daily life. The same lesson appears in different relationships. The same challenge arises in different situations. The same opportunity returns wearing a different face. At first, this may feel frustrating. You may wonder why life keeps repeating itself. But perhaps life is not repeating itself. Perhaps it is patiently offering another chance to respond differently. Every recurring experience asks a simple question. Have you become someone new, or are you still answering life from the same old identity? The answer is revealed not by your words, but by your response. When your response changes, the pattern often changes with it. This is why awareness is so powerful. It breaks unconscious repetition. It allows you to step out of cycles that once seemed impossible to escape. Slowly, you begin trusting your own perception again, not because you believe every passing thought or emotional impulse, but because you've learned the difference between fear speaking loudly and wisdom speaking quietly. Fear demands immediate action. Wisdom often whispers. Fear insists that everything is urgent. Wisdom reminds you that clarity rarely arrives through panic. Fear pushes you toward control. Wisdom invites you toward understanding. As this distinction becomes clearer, your decisions begin changing. You stop forcing outcomes that no longer feel aligned. You become more patient with uncertainty. Thus, you recognize that not every unanswered question requires an immediate solution. Some answers reveal themselves only after you've become capable of receiving them. This patience creates space for unexpected opportunities. Ironically, many of the moments people later describe as fortunate were recognized only because they had developed the awareness to see them. Others may have encountered the exact same opportunity and walked straight past it. Awareness is often the difference. The quiet signs are rarely loud enough to compete with a restless mind. They appear in small conversations, subtle realizations, unexpected connections, moments of stillness, and insights that seem almost too simple to matter, yet these quiet moments gradually weave together until you suddenly realize they have been guiding you all along. And that is when you understand that the most important signs were never meant to astonish you. They were meant to awaken you. As your awareness deepens, something even more important begins to change. The quiet signs are no longer found only in the world around you. They begin appearing within you. One of the clearest signs that good things are coming is not that your fears disappear, but that they stop controlling the direction of your life. For a long time, many of us believe that peace means never feeling anxious again. We imagine that strength means eliminating every insecurity, every painful memory, and every uncomfortable emotion. We wait for the day when nothing inside us feels uncertain, but that day rarely arrives. The human mind is not designed to become empty of fear. It is designed to learn how to relate to fear differently. There is a part of every person that carries forgotten disappointments, hidden anger, old shame, silent jealousy, grief that was never fully expressed, and dreams that were abandoned before they had a chance to grow. These parts do not disappear simply because we refuse to acknowledge them. In fact, the more we push them away, the more quietly they influence our decisions. A person who refuses to face rejection may avoid every meaningful opportunity. A person who hides from disappointment may never allow themselves to hope again. A person who buries old hurt may unknowingly recreate the same painful relationships over and over. What remains unseen often continues shaping what is seen. This is why one of the most meaningful stages of growth begins when you stop running from yourself. Not because you suddenly enjoy discomfort, but because you realize that avoiding pain has become more exhausting than facing it. This realization changes everything. Instead of asking, "How can I escape this feeling?" you begin asking, "Why is this feeling asking for my attention?" That single question transforms suffering into understanding. You begin noticing that anger often protects sadness. Perfectionism often protects insecurity. Constant busyness often protects loneliness. The need to control everything often hides a deep fear of uncertainty. When you recognize these patterns, you stop treating your emotions as enemies. You begin seeing them as messages. Not every message should be obeyed, but every message deserves to be understood. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack for so many years that you forget you're wearing it. Every step feels difficult, but because you've lived with the weight for so long, you assume life is simply supposed to feel this exhausting. Then one day, you set the backpack down. Nothing in the outside world has changed. The road is the same. The destination is the same. But suddenly, every step feels lighter. This is what emotional healing often feels like. It is not always about adding something new to your life. Sometimes, it is about finally putting down what you were never meant to carry forever. Old guilt, old resentment, old stories about your worth, old beliefs that convinced you you would never be enough. These burdens quietly drain your energy even when you're no longer aware of them. The remarkable thing is that healing rarely begins with dramatic breakthroughs. More often, it begins with small moments of honesty. You admit that something hurt more than you allowed yourself to believe. You acknowledge that you've been pretending to be stronger than you actually felt. You forgive yourself for decisions you made with the understanding you had at the time. These moments may appear insignificant, yet they gradually transform your relationship with yourself. And once that relationship changes, your relationship with the world begins changing as well. You become less defensive because you are no longer constantly defending an insecure identity. You become more compassionate because you've learned to extend compassion toward your own imperfections. You become less judgmental because you've discovered that every person is carrying struggles invisible to everyone else. This quiet transformation cannot be measured by status, income, or recognition. It reveals itself in your presence. People begin feeling calmer around you. Conversations become more genuine. You no longer feel the need to prove that you're right in every discussion. You listen more carefully. You react less impulsively. You speak with greater intention. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of inner stability. Strength is often misunderstood. Many believe strength means becoming emotionally untouchable. True strength is something far quieter. It is the ability to remain open without becoming fragile, to remain kind without becoming naive, to remain hopeful without denying reality. This kind of strength is built one honest encounter with yourself at a time. There will still be difficult days. Old fears may occasionally return. Painful memories may visit unexpectedly, but they no longer take control of your identity. You learn to say, "This feeling is here, but it is not the whole of who I am." That simple distinction creates enormous freedom. You stop identifying yourself with every passing emotion. Instead, you become the observer who notices those emotions without being consumed by them. With time, the inner battles that once demanded all your energy begin growing quieter. Not because life has become perfect, but because you have stopped fighting yourself. And when that inner conflict begins to dissolve, something remarkable happens. The energy once spent resisting your own mind becomes available for creativity, for meaningful relationships, for courageous decisions, for building the future instead of endlessly repairing the past. This is one of the quietest signs that good things are approaching. Not because the world has suddenly become easier, but because you have become more whole. And when you no longer need to defeat yourself each day, you finally have the strength to embrace everything life has been preparing you for. As you become more whole within yourself, you begin noticing another quiet sign that often feels confusing before it feels reassuring. Certain parts of your life begin to fall away without you forcing them to. Doors that once seemed firmly open begin to close. Relationships change. Opportunities disappear. Plans you were certain would succeed quietly dissolve. At first, it can feel as though life is moving backward, but not every closed door is a loss. Sometimes, it is evidence that you have reached the end of a chapter your heart had already outgrown, even if your mind had not yet accepted it. This is one of the most difficult truths to embrace because we naturally attach ourselves to what is familiar. Even when something no longer brings us peace, its familiarity creates the illusion of safety. We convince ourselves that staying where we are is less frightening than stepping into the unknown. Yet growth has a gentle way of exposing what no longer belongs. A conversation that once felt effortless begins feeling forced. A goal that once inspired you begins feeling empty. A routine that once brought comfort now feels like repetition without purpose. You may try to recreate the old excitement, hoping that if you work harder or hold on tighter, everything will return to the way it was. But some seasons are not meant to return, not because they were mistakes, but because they completed the work they came to do. Think about the changing seasons in nature. Autumn never apologizes for letting its leaves fall. The tree does not cling desperately to every leaf, fearing it will never be full again. It releases what has reached its natural end, trusting that what appears empty today is quietly preparing for new growth tomorrow. Human life follows a similar rhythm. Yet we often resist it. We hold on to relationships that have become built on obligation instead of genuine connection. We remain in environments that no longer encourage growth simply because they are predictable. We continue carrying dreams that belong to a younger version of ourselves, even after our deeper values have changed. Holding on can sometimes require more energy than letting go. And that constant effort slowly drains the vitality needed for what comes next. This does not mean that every ending should be celebrated immediately. Endings often hurt. They bring uncertainty, disappointment, and grief. Even healthy change can involve sadness, because every transition asks us to release something that once mattered deeply. There is wisdom in allowing yourself to mourn what is ending. Pretending that loss does not affect you, does not make you stronger. Acknowledging it honestly does. You can appreciate what something gave you, while still accepting that it is time to move forward. You can honor a relationship without forcing it to remain exactly as it was. You can be grateful for a season without trying to live in it forever. This quiet acceptance creates remarkable freedom. Instead of fighting every unexpected change, you begin asking a different question. What space is this making in my life? That question shifts your attention from what has disappeared to what may now become possible. Imagine trying to fill a room that is already overflowing with old furniture. No matter how beautiful the new pieces are, there is simply no room for them. Before something new can enter, something old must be moved. Life often works in the same way. New opportunities require emotional space. Healthy relationships require emotional availability. Creative ideas require mental openness. If your life remains completely occupied by what no longer serves you, there is little room for what truly belongs. Many people pray for change while unconsciously protecting the very patterns preventing it. They ask for peace while refusing to release resentment. They ask for purpose while remaining attached to distractions. They ask for new relationships while clinging to old emotional wounds. Growth asks for participation. It invites you to cooperate with the changes already unfolding, instead of resisting them at every step. This cooperation does not require knowing exactly where life is leading. It requires trusting that not every unanswered question is a reason to stop walking. Sometimes clarity arrives only after you have taken the first uncertain step. You may notice that people naturally drift away without conflict. Conversations become shorter. Shared interests quietly fade. Instead of seeing this as rejection, you begin recognizing it as realignment. Not every person is meant to accompany you through every chapter. Some enter your life to encourage you, some arrive to challenge you. Some reflect parts of yourself that needed healing, and some simply remind you that every meeting has its season. Releasing someone or something does not erase its value. It simply acknowledges that its purpose has been fulfilled. There is maturity in knowing when to stop forcing what no longer flows naturally. This maturity extends beyond relationships. It reaches your ambitions as well. Perhaps you once chased recognition because you believed it would finally make you feel worthy. Perhaps you pursued success according to someone else's definitions instead of your own. As your inner life becomes more grounded, these borrowed ambitions begin losing their power. You no longer ask only, "Can I achieve this?" You begin asking, "Does this truly reflect the person I am becoming?" That question changes the direction of your life. It protects you from climbing ladders that lead to places your heart never wanted to reach. Slowly, you realize that good things are not always added to your life. Sometimes they arrive disguised as what quietly leaves it. A closed door can protect you from a future that no longer fits who you are. An ending can become the beginning of deeper peace. An unexpected change can create possibilities you could never have planned for yourself. Looking back, Many of the moments that once felt like painful losses reveal themselves as quiet acts of preparation. The path became clearer because something unnecessary stepped aside. Your heart became lighter because something heavy was finally released. Your future became possible because your past loosened its grip. And when you stop fearing every ending, you finally become ready to welcome every beginning. After all of these quiet changes have unfolded, there comes a realization that is both simple and life-changing. It does not arrive with fanfare. It does not demand attention. Instead, it settles gently into your heart until one day you recognize that the person who began this journey is no longer the person standing here now. The greatest sign that good things are coming is not found in a prediction about tomorrow. It is found in the quiet transformation that has already taken place within you today. There was a time when you believed that happiness existed somewhere ahead of you. You imagined that peace would arrive only after you achieved the next goal, solved the next problem, earned the next opportunity, or finally received the recognition you had been waiting for. So you chased certainty, you chased approval, you chased success. You chased the feeling that one more accomplishment would finally convince you that you were enough. But the strange thing about chasing is that it often keeps what you seek just beyond your reach. The harder you try to force every outcome, the more anxious you become about losing control. Every delay feels like fear. Every obstacle feels personal. Every unanswered question becomes another reason to doubt yourself. Eventually, however, something begins to shift, not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because your relationship with life becomes healthier. You begin understanding that there is a profound difference between pursuing something with intention and chasing it out of fear. Fear says, if I don't get this, I will never be enough. Wisdom quietly responds, if it belongs in my life, I will meet it as the person I am becoming. That change in perspective transforms everything. You still work, you still grow, you still dream, but your actions are no longer driven by desperation. They are guided by purpose. You stop measuring your worth by how quickly your life changes. Instead, you begin measuring it by how honestly you live each day. This is where authentic confidence begins. Not the loud confidence that needs constant attention. Not the confidence that depends on comparison or applause, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are, even when nobody is watching. It appears in ordinary moments. You no longer feel compelled to explain every decision. You no longer panic when others misunderstand you. You no longer abandon your values simply to fit into places where they do not belong. There is an unusual calmness that begins replacing the urgency you once carried. The future still matters to you, but it no longer terrifies you. You prepare for it without trying to control every detail. You trust your ability to respond instead of demanding certainty before taking the next step. That trust is one of the greatest forms of freedom. It allows you to remain open instead of rigid, curious instead of fearful, pouted instead of restless. As this inner stability grows, something remarkable begins happening in your outer life as well. People notice the difference before you mention it. They sense that your presence has changed. There is less tension in your words, less need to impress, less emotional exhaustion, more authenticity, more steadiness, more peace. Ironically, these are often the qualities that attract meaningful opportunities, Notice, not because life suddenly rewards perfection, but because authenticity creates stronger relationships, clearer decisions, and healthier boundaries. When you stop pretending to be someone else, you naturally begin connecting with people and experiences that recognize who you truly are. The opportunities that arrive now feel different. They require less pretending, less forcing, less proving. Instead of asking you to become someone you're not, they invite you to express who you've quietly become. This is why genuine transformation cannot be rushed. If the opportunities had arrived years earlier, you might not have been emotionally prepared to receive them. You may have sabotaged them with insecurity. You may have overlooked them because you were chasing something louder. You may have mistaken them for something ordinary because your attention was focused elsewhere. Now your eyes have changed. Your heart has changed. Your understanding has changed. And because you have changed, your relationship with life changes as well. You begin recognizing that abundance is not simply about receiving more. It is about becoming someone who can appreciate, protect, and wisely use what is given. Many people spend years asking for bigger blessings, while neglecting to become the kind of person who can carry greater responsibility with humility. Real growth prepares the person before it reveals the opportunity. That preparation often feels invisible. It happens through quiet mornings of reflection, difficult conversations, patient waiting, honest self-examination, choosing integrity when compromise would have been easier, forgiving when resentment seemed justified, continuing forward even when immediate results were nowhere to be seen. None of these moments appeared extraordinary while you were living them, yet together they reshaped your character. Looking back, you realize that every season had its purpose. The silence taught you to listen. The uncertainty taught you to trust. The struggles revealed your hidden strength. The endings created room for new beginnings. The inner battles became the source of your deepest wisdom. Even the delays carried lessons that success alone could never have taught. Suddenly, life no longer feels like a collection of disconnected events. It becomes a story of quiet preparation, a story in which every challenge contributed something valuable to the person you were becoming. This realization removes the need to rush. You understand that what truly belongs in your life does not require you to abandon your values to obtain it. It asks you to continue becoming the person capable of receiving it with gratitude, maturity, and peace. And perhaps that is the quietest sign of all. You are no longer waiting for life to begin, because you have discovered that the most important transformation was never happening around you. It was happening within you. And when you become the person you were always meant to be, the good things you have been waiting for no longer feel distant. They simply find their way home.